Guys, welcome back. Sure. I've had a hectic day today. I've been cooking some stew and sadza for an international food event tomorrow. It's over 200 people. It's going to be small portions, but still, it's a lot of food to cook. And I played volleyball. Got my Zimbabwe shirt on. Let's see it. There we go. Zimbabwe. Played some volleyball. Yeah. So no tea for me tonight. I'm just going to be rehydrating with some water. But yeah, you guys should grab your tea and tune in for chapter 25. We're getting close to the end. And you guys must come and join for the second book, because I had a sneak peek and it's looking good. Alright, chapter 25, Memories. Mislike me not for my complexion, the shadowed livery of the burnished sun, to who I am a neighbour and near bred. From guess what? The Merchant of Venice, Shakespeare. The first time I saw Clement, he was sitting under an acacia tree next to Woodland service station, strumming on a guitar made out of a olivine cooking oil tin. Fury was sitting there next to him watching cars. I stood there staring at these two black men while my car was getting filled. The attendant followed my gaze and informed me that they were both mad. Clement comes to visit Fury, and all he does is sing. And all Fury wants to do is watch cars going down the road. My curiosity got the better of me, and so I parked my car and went over and sat down in the shade of the acacia. I greeted them both, and they both smiled and bobbed their heads. Clement continued singing, "I'm so happy," over and over again. Fury immediately turned his attention back to the road in case he missed a car going by. "So, Fury, how long have you lived here?" I could see he lived there because all his pots and blankets were under the tree. 22 years, boss, still watching the road. "Do you sleep here too?" "No, boss. I sleep behind the tire rack next to Buzz Dave's workshop." "You don't seem crazy to me. Why do you stay here?" In the African culture, you can be very blunt without being impolite. For a moment he smiled and looked at me. "I was a cook boy for 19 years. Then one day, my boss told me I was crazy and that I should go across the field and live under that tree. That is exactly what I did. Every year, I grow maize and sell them. I have a girlfriend whom I visit 3 times a week. When I need food, people give it to me. Boss Dave is very good to me. I like to sit in the ditch and watch cars most of the day. Now you tell me if I'm crazy." "He is crazy," Fury said, pointing at Clement, who was twitching, squeaking, and making odd contortions with his face. After a few moments, he seemed to regain his thoughts, whatever they were, and started to sing, I'm so happy, all over again. I went over to the kiosk at the service station and bought 2 packets of lacto and 2 loaves of bread. I went back to the tree and gave each man a packet of lacto and a loaf of bread. So lacto is kind of like I don't know how to describe it. Kind of like sour milk. I think some people call it kefir milk. It's like yogurt but with a different bacteria. Nice, tangy and lumpy. I love it. Much cheaper than yogurt too. Anyway, where was I? Fury thanked me and carefully bit off a corner of the packet and took a long swig of lacto before taking a piece of bread. Clement pulled his packet in half, spilling some and pouring what he could into a rusty bowl. Then he took great chunks of bread, sopped it in the lacto, and pushed the chunks into his mouth. "He is hungry," stated Fury. Even a crazy person could see that. Then, when the rains came, I watched Fury, and sure enough, he planted as much ground as was possible with maize, sugarcane, and pumpkins. As soon as they were ripe, he started to sell them. I would chat with him whenever I had a chance. One day he brought me 6 ears of maize and thanked me for looking after him when he was hungry. I spent a year taking vehicles to Zaire. I would buy cars in Johannesburg and then sell them in Lubumbashi. I would then catch gaboon vipers and bring them back south for the snake parks and museums. As soon as we arrived in Lubumbashi, we would take our place on the veranda of the Murmur Hotel at a coffee table and send out word that we had a car for sale. While we were sat there, all the peddlers in town would come by trying to sell their wares, everything from drugs to curios. It would take about 10 days to sell a vehicle, and then we would hitch a ride south again to get another vehicle and deliver the vipers. Transporting gaboon vipers gave me several opportunities to study and perfect my levitation studies. In fact, even I was surprised at some of the outcomes. After my success at the Zambian border on a previous occasion, I couldn't wait for the opportunity to try out my theories again. We had arrived at Chirundu border post, where customs and immigration are particularly rude and nasty. Perhaps I would be too if I were posted in such a hot place and dealing with so many drug smugglers. Yeah, Chirundu, that's a rough border post. That's between Zambia and Zimbabwe in the Zambezi Valley. In the summer, it can regularly get above 40 degrees there. 40 degrees. On the previous occasion, they had even torn open Teresa's packet of Tampax to see if she was smuggling drugs. I was ordered, "Open that bag," by a short, very ugly man. "I must warn you, sir, that I am a witch doctor," I informed him. "White people don't have witch doctors," he snorted at me. "Ah, but you're wrong, sir. Look into my eyes." A plan was forming in my head. "So, why don't you cure me then? For I am sick," he shot at me through slit eyes. "That, sir, I will do. Just sit down here and let me wrap your hands in my bandana, and then I will ask you to close your eyes." This was all done, and I took out my bag with the gaboon viper, and very slowly unzipped the bag. The gaboon lifted his head about 9 inches, and just sat there looking at us, with his tongue flicking in and out. "Now, sir, if you will open your eyes," I said softly. I wanted to say, "and you will be cured," but I never had the chance. From a sitting position, his hands tied together with my bandana, he leapt straight up and backwards over an 8-foot security fence. At the same time, he was doing a fine imitation of a Swiss yodeler. Everyone in the customs and immigration office also took off, following my man up a bank and into the bush, just as they had done at the Zambian border. "What about my passport stamp?" I shouted. From somewhere in the bush came the reply, "Stamp it yourself." This I did. I also found the keys that unlocked the boom and let myself back into Zimbabwe. I do believe it was one of the fastest and most pleasurable crossings I had ever had into Zim. On our second visit to Lubumbashi, we were being served coffee when our waiter visibly paled. I turned to see why he was so pale and looked into the face of a man only about a foot away. I greeted him in Swahili and smiled. This man smiled and then went over to my car and sat down next to the rear bumper. "Be careful of him, Bwana," warned the waiter. "He is crazy and has bad spirits." Now I was familiar with bad spirits and ordered a Coke and a loaf of bread right away. I instructed the waiter to take it to the madman, but he refused. I found out from the waiter that his name was Jacques, and there was no one in town that would go near him. He had on a plastic shower cap. His ears had pieces of copper wire and coloured thread looped around them. He had on the scraps of several shirts. He also had on 2 pairs of trousers, and somehow had managed to find 2 pairs with holes near the pants part on the opposite sides. So when he put on the first pair, his one leg went into the trousers, but the other leg would come out of the hole, and so the opposite for the next pair. When he walked, it looked like he had 4 legs. This was all held together with a large piece of towing rope. He wore one man's shoe and one woman's shoe, neither left nor right being much concern. He had an incredible physique with blazing eyes. It was no wonder everyone was terrified of him. I sat watching for several minutes. People coming down the sidewalk would see him. When people coming down the sidewalk would see him, they would cross over to the other side of the street. And so in a town where stolen cars were the order of the day, my car was completely safe. I was always able to handle wild animals and calm them down. In black culture, they say that my spirits rest in the animals. I went down the steps from off the veranda to Jacques. "I've brought you something to eat," I said, offering him the coke and bread. He bounded to his feet, accepted them with both hands, showing great respect, and then sat down. No one in the finest restaurant would have eaten a meal with the finesse that Jacques did, eating his bread and sipping his coke. Out of the corner of his eye, he watched us. When he finished, he took off down the street so fast that his shower cap and shoes flew off. A block away, 2 people had set up a stall selling sweets and cigarettes. When they saw Jacques coming, they shrieked and took off. He stopped in front of their stall and took a packet of Okapi cigarettes and brought them to Teresa. She had just finished her last cigarette and he had noticed that. To me, he gave a string of beads that you're supposed to hold while you are praying or studying the Quran if you're a Muslim. A beautiful gift from his crazy heart. I told Jacques that Teresa wanted to take his picture. He only spoke French and Swahili, so I had to translate. He went out and took a fancy to a large motorbike parked in the shade and stood next to it. I told him that he had to stand in the sun, so he picked up the motorbike and carried it into the sun, placed one hand on the bike and the other hand on his hip. Teresa took his photo and then I told him to put the motorbike back. He picked it up effortlessly and put it back. I went over and tried to pick it up. I could only just barely lift the back tire off the ground. Jacques smiled and went back to watch my car. Jacques became a fixture with us. We fed him every day. He would watch our cars. Sometimes he would get overzealous and chase cars with a large steel pipe down the street if he thought they were driving too close to our car. I'd have to yell at him to stop and come back, and he obeyed. When he was guarding, he would sing the most beautiful French love songs in a rich baritone voice. Teresa and I took him to the zoo one day. While we were there, for a brief moment, Teresa and I took him to the zoo one day. While we were there, for a brief moment, he regained his sanity. He started to speak in Swahili, telling me that he had been the bodyguard for Tshombe, the last president. When Tshombe was ousted, the new government had tortured him with electricity to his head and genitals. He stood there looking at me, and his eyes started to glaze over. Slowly and softly, he started to sing another love song in French. He was back in his safe world. Towards the end of the year, we came back to town expecting to find Jacques waiting for us as usual. He wasn't there, but I didn't worry, as I knew he disappeared from time to time. After a week, I put out a reward of 1,000 zaires, which is about $2, to anyone who would show me where Jacques was. 3 days later, one of the commissionaires came to me and told me to come with him. We went to the edge of town to one of the huge gravel pits where they had used to dig gravel out to make the roads. At the bottom of the pit was a collection of all the crazy people that had been picked off the street by the army. They had been brought here and shot. Jacques was amongst them. When I tell Westerners about this incident, they are usually horrified. But judging by the mental institutions I have seen in the Western countries, I would honestly rather be dead. But then, as my father says, you're thinking black. I recently went out to the Ascot shopping centre to buy groceries. Out front, there are people selling curios, crocheted tablecloths, etc. There is Clement in one corner. I go over and greet him. He smiles while he twitches and squeaks. He wants to sell something too. He's collected some bottle caps, stones, and 2 tins. He's lined them up and sits behind them just like the others. Whenever I shop, I buy a packet of lacto and a loaf of bread. On my way back to my car, I stop by Clement again and say to him, "I'd like to buy this stone, Clement. How about me giving you this lacto and bread for the stone?" He jumps up and down, clapping his hands. It's the first sale of the day. But that's not enough gratitude. He puts his head on the tarmac and does a headstand. A perfect headstand. He stands there till he gets dizzy and then falls over with a great thwack and lies on his back stunned. I take my stone and place the plastic bag with the bread and lacto on his stomach. While I'm walking away, I look back and Clement is there smiling, strumming on his olivine tin guitar and singing, "I'm so happy, I'm so happy." Alright, that's it for today. Yeah, well, again, as we say, that's Africa. Right, guys, I'm exhausted. I'm gonna go have a shower and then hit the sack. Hope you guys sleep well. I'll check you tomorrow. Cheers.